Rule. Hopefully most of you guys are familiar with it. This is the new amateur rocket rule. When I first came in at AST, they had the ballistic coefficient and some other stuff in there, so I told them to take it out. I don't need to look at all that stuff. I'm doing my analysis on it. The two big things to keep in mind: the 200,000 pound second and cannot reach an altitude greater than what you see up there. These are the three classes. Basically, I break it down in my terminology. High school kids or maybe some college, you're a high-powered and advanced high-powered. A lot of those rockets are going over 100,000 feet. So those are really the three classes of amateur rockets that normally, well, those are all the ones we see. I only really see the high-powered and advanced high-powered. Anything that's a Q motor or above, anything that's over 25,000 feet is coming up to headquarters. We're looking at it, we're doing some analysis work on it. Why do we need to do that? Because you have commercial airlines flying in those, in that region, so we need to make sure that the operation that you're proposing is not an impact to what they're trying to do. Delta, Continental, some of those guys.
What if we're flying in controlled airspace?
Everything is in controlled airspace except for your restricted military use.
Airspace, sorry.
So I didn't put that up here. So the first thing is just defining if you're amateur. So if you're going to come talk to me or you're going to come talk to Sherman or someone else in AST 200. Once we make that determination, we then look at the 7711 form that you're filling out. I'm looking at your launch site. Where are you doing your operations at? That'll tell me what altitude is controlled airspace. So I'll know that, hey, you should be waiving controlled airspace. You should be waiving within 5 miles of the airport. There's certain things based off of your location that you have to do. Now, with the altitude, I would know if it's only 1,500 feet, a quarter of the altitude. If you're waiving the quarter of the altitude, what are you doing to mitigate the altitude or the separation distance that you would have to do nominally? So if you're doing 100,000 feet and you need to keep out 25,000 feet, say you want to waive that, well, how are you going to make sure that your rocket doesn't impact anything outside of the new separation distance that you have in place? Some people say that, oh, all I need is 5,000 feet, I don't need the 25. Well, show me how you're going to do it. That's where you get into a little bit of your, if you haven't noticed in the 101.29, some of your not 6 degree, but 3 sigma, where is your stuff coming down at? Yeah, pretty much that's where that's located at.
The first launch license or permit we filed under these new regulations, we were asked to do a 1,000-point Monte Carlo with 10 variables. Is that still in effect?
1,000 Monte
1,000 points. 1,000-point Monte Carlo with 10 variables.
If it's amateur rocket, I normally see that, and it's
like a.
And that I think that has something to do with your the probability of where your pieces are coming down at. So from my standpoint of view, what I'm looking at, some of the variables that I'm looking at, your launch rail, we know that it's going to move a little bit. Your winds that you're taking.
In the Monte Carlo.
Right. These are things that are in the Monte Carlo run that you're doing. I'm just trying to convey the point that the reason why we may want 1,000 or maybe 500, I don't normally.
The second application we filed, we did like 100 points. And
I don't know if I looked at it, because I normally don't tell people you need 1,000, because that's my number. So I normally don't tell people the number that I'm looking at. So I don't know who.
Your name, Mark?
Yeah, my name is Marcus.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what is a good number? Well, I guess it depends on the launch site, doesn't it?
It depends on the launch site. It depends on if this. And two, it depends on what rocket club you're with. Some clubs, they have their own internal thing that they do, and that's the information I get up. So when you said that number, maybe someone else or someone answer this should be knowing those numbers. Okay. Amateur rocket is a controlled airspace. Now, a lot of you guys know that when you're doing it from a military site, or restricted airspace. It's whatever the controlling agency is, and this will be a good lead-in for when Bill comes up. If you're going to call up Wismer's airspace, well, now we're not in the picture in the fact that we know that the airspace is going to be taken care of because there's another controlling agency. Wismer has their own air traffic controllers who's making sure that none of their planes are in that area during those times of operation. It's a similar thing, I think, at Holloman because that is military airspace as well. So it all depends on where you're launching from. That's another reason why we need to know your lat longs of your launch operation. This process here, most amateur rocket application, by the time I get it, the clock's already started, so it's about 45 days total. You should have your one-on-one waiver or your waiver to do your launch operation. I generally see the majority of these are Farsight, out at Black Rock, some at Spaceport America. So some of the higher altitude flights, I normally see them on the West Coast. I already know where you're trying to do your operations at, so I can just plug in some of my codes that I already have for it.
Dumb question. Do they do vertical launches at Spaceport America?
Oh, yeah.
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 We do.
Really?
We've done several.
Speed Up has done a number, or not Speed Up.
Up aerospace.
Yeah.
Close to vertical.
Okay.
If you launch from East Coast and land nearby the West Coast, would that still be considered suborbital?
In orbit.
Yeah. Your E sub C would be so, the intensity of that is.
Actually, the formal answer is your vacuum instantaneous impact point can never leave the surface of the Earth.
Right.
So it would be very hard to do what you just described without having your vacuum instantaneous impact point leave the surface of the Earth. It would not leave the surface of the Earth, so the answer would probably be no.
But for purposes of the challenge, it's specified that the vehicle in orbit has to pass over the launch site. So that would be an impossible situation.
Well,
For the convoy.
for testing,
Right.
for example.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Testing would work.
Okay.
You're not going to be surprised if you don't have the paperwork in order for an actual launch. So,
If you don't
How-
want the
how-
paperwork and fail.
yeah,
You can
but
do-
how close you come to an actual full orbital launch before you try and apply for a launch license? You know, you're probably pushing the envelope if it is, well, you know, if I come down 3 feet short of my launch point, maybe, no, come on. You know, at that point, you really should have had a launch license.
The formal definitional value is the one I described, your
Yeah.
vacuum instantaneous impact point. You cannot get all the way around like that with a vacuum instantaneous impact point that stays up in the Earth. Now, your reality is air drag will pull you back down, but you cannot do that and meet the definition.
I think that's it. But 101 is 101.21 through 101.29. I think is everything amateur rocket. Majority of you guys in here know where to find it. The 7711 form is what you have to fill out to get a waiver, and based off of the launch site, based off of the controlled airspace, and some of the other operational situations would determine what needs to be waived per the regulation. So that's it. You do safety approvals, right?
Yeah. Okay. Paul needs to start to present really quickly.
Yeah, I'm doing the next presentation, and I have to leave here at 6 o'clock to catch my flight, so we're running a little late.
Wait, we have to plug the FAA guy.
Oh, I get it.